They laughed before I even sat down. Not the kind of laughter that stops conversation. Not the kind that draws attention. This was quieter. Careful. The kind people use when they think they're being polite. I heard it anyway. I always did. My cousin Denise was already seated, legs crossed, phone face down beside her plate like it was part of the outfit. My brother leaned back in his chair, arm draped behind his wife, Carla. Uncle Mark stood near the window, checking the reflection of his watch like he had somewhere better to be. Then I walked in. Simple dress. Flat shoes. No makeup beyond mascara I'd applied in my car. The laughter dipped. Shifted. Denise smiled first. Oh. You came. Not hi. Not it's good to see you. Just surprise. I said I would, I replied, sliding into the last empty chair. Carla's eyes moved immediately to my hands. No ring. No bracelet. Mark cleared his throat. I didn't know you still came out to these things. Still. As if this was something I should have grown out of. I smiled anyway. I always smiled. It made people relax. It made them underestimate me. The waiter came. Everyone ordered confidently. Steak. Wine. Add-ons. When it was my turn, Denise tilted her head slightly. You don't have to match us, you know. I wasn't planning to, I said gently. Just soup is fine. That did it. A soft laugh from Carla. A raised eyebrow from my brother. Mark's lips pressed together like he'd confirmed something. Soup. It was the smallest detail, but it told them everything they wanted to believe. That I was still the same. Still modest. Still struggling. Still the one who never quite caught up. Conversation flowed around me like I wasn't there. Denise talked about her upcoming renovation. Carla mentioned an opportunity her friend had pitched. Mark bragged about expanding his business, though I noticed he avoided specifics. No one asked what I was doing. No one asked how I was paying my rent. No one wondered why I didn't flinch when prices were mentioned. They didn't know I'd already eaten earlier. They didn't know I wasn't hungry. They didn't know that my phone, silent in my bag, had shown a deposit notification that morning so large I'd had to sit down when I saw it. $450,000. Transferred. Cleared. Mine. Grandpa's money. Denise leaned closer to Carla, lowering her voice, but not enough. She's always been simple. I stirred my soup slowly. Simple. They used that word like it explained everything. Simple meant safe. Predictable. Unthreatening. What they didn't know was that simplicity had been my camouflage. I'd learned years ago that people show you exactly who they are when they think you don't matter. And at that table, surrounded by people who shared my blood, I realized something that settled deep in my chest. They didn't see me at all. They never had. And they had no idea how dangerous that was. I paid my portion quietly. Left a generous tip. As I stood to go, Denise smiled again. Drive safe. I will, I said. Outside, the night air was cool. Steady. Honest. I sat in my car for a moment before starting the engine. Because what they didn't know, what none of them could imagine, was that Grandpa had seen everything they hadn't. And the reason he'd chosen me was because I listened. Because I waited. And because I knew exactly when to stay quiet. Grandpa died on a Tuesday. It was raining, the soft kind that feels personal, like the sky is trying not to interrupt. I remember because I was folding laundry when my phone rang, and for some reason before I even answered, I already knew. The hospital nurse spoke gently. Too gently. By the time I hung up, the house felt different. Like the walls had shifted a few inches inward. Grandpa was the one person who made the world feel wider just by being in it. And suddenly, he was gone. The funeral came quickly. Too quickly. Denise arrived in black heels she could barely walk in. Carla cried loudly, dramatically, dabbing at her eyes but checking who was watching. Mark shook hands like he was hosting a business mixer instead of burying his father. I stood near the back. That's where I always stood. People hugged each other over me, reaching around, patting shoulders, whispering condolences that never included my name. I was a shadow in a room full of noise. During the service, the pastor spoke about legacy, about how some people leave behind more than memories. I watched Denise nod like she already knew what that meant. Afterward, clusters formed. Quiet calculations wrapped in sympathy. The house alone must be worth. I heard he had investments. He always talked about saving. No one asked if there was money. Only how much. No one looked at me. The lawyer's office was small and smelled like old books and lemon cleaner. The chairs were arranged carefully, like order could soften greed. Denise sat forward, ankles crossed, hands folded. Carla whispered something to my brother and smiled. Mark leaned back, arms crossed, confident. I took the last chair again. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and began. Personal effects. Sentimental items. Carla perked up when the antique furniture was mentioned. Denise smiled when the house came up. Mark nodded at the mention of property taxes, already thinking ahead. I watched their faces. Every assumption played out in real time. Then the lawyer paused. A small pause, but a heavy one. There is an additional matter, he said. Mark straightened. Denise inhaled sharply. A trust, the lawyer continued. Established 5 years ago. Denise frowned. 5. The lawyer nodded. Private. Irrevocable. The room shifted. This wasn't part of their mental math. The beneficiary, he said, glancing down at the document, is. He said my name. Clearly. Carefully. Silence swallowed the room whole. Denise laughed first. A short, confused sound. No, that can't be right. Carla looked at the lawyer like he'd insulted her. Mark leaned forward. There must be a mistake. There isn't, the lawyer replied calmly. He named the amount. $450,000. My brother turned slowly, like his neck resisted the movement. Carla's hand slipped from his arm. Denise's smile froze halfway off her face. I stayed still. I had practiced this moment without knowing I was practicing it my entire life. There's a letter, the lawyer said, extending an envelope. Not to the table, not to the group. To me. Written by your grandfather. Intended for you alone. Denise reached out instinctively, then stopped herself. Can we hear it? She asked. The lawyer shook his head. The letter specifies privacy. I slipped it into my bag. That movement, small, quiet, felt louder than anything that had happened all morning. Well, Denise said finally, forcing a laugh, I'm sure there's a reason. Her eyes searched my face, trying to find panic, guilt, gratitude, something small. Mark cleared his throat. Managing that kind of money can be complicated. Carla nodded quickly. We could help. You know. Make sure you don't get taken advantage of. Taken advantage of. I looked at them. Really looked. At the people who'd never invited me into conversations. Who'd never asked my opinion. Who'd decided my limits without consulting me. I'll be careful, I said. They smiled. Not because they believed me, but because they believed I'd need them. Outside, Denise caught up to me. We should get lunch soon. Just us. Carla texted me before I reached my car. Mark left a voicemail before I pulled out of the lot. Everyone suddenly remembered my name. I drove home slowly. Didn't open the letter. Didn't call anyone. Because I already knew one thing for certain. Grandpa hadn't made a mistake. And whatever was in that envelope wasn't just money. It was an answer. I didn't open Grandpa's letter right away. I set my bag down by the door, kicked off my shoes, and stood in the middle of my living room like I didn't quite belong there anymore. The house was quiet. Not the peaceful kind, just empty. That envelope felt heavier than it should have. Money changes things. But explanation. That changes people. I finally sat on the edge of the bed, lamp off, window cracked open just enough to let in the sound of distant traffic. The world kept moving. Grandpa didn't. The paper inside was thick. The kind he liked. No fancy font. No legal language. Just his handwriting, steady, familiar, unmistakable. If you're reading this, he wrote, then I made the right choice. I swallowed. He didn't waste words. Never had. He wrote about watching family dinners from the end of the table. About how some people speak to be heard, and others listen to understand. He wrote about noticing who stayed after the noise died down. Who helped without being asked. Who didn't need an audience. He wrote my name again. More than once. You think you're quiet, he said. But quiet people see everything. He mentioned Denise interrupting me every Thanksgiving. Mark correcting me even when I was right. Carla smiling when I failed and tightening her lips when I didn't. They confuse humility with ignorance, he wrote. Let them. My chest tightened, not with sadness, but recognition. He knew. He knew about the second job I never mentioned. The online classes I took at night. The way I budgeted down to the dollar, not because I had to, but because I chose to. I didn't give you this because you need it, he wrote. I gave it to you because you know how to wait. I read that line twice. Then came the part that changed how I breathed. They will come to you with smiles, he warned. Advice. Guilt. Fear dressed as concern. Don't rush. Money reveals who people are when they think time is on their side. At the bottom, his signature. Firm. Certain. And one final sentence, underlined once. Use this when you're ready, not when they expect you to. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. That night, I didn't celebrate. I didn't browse houses or cars or vacations. I opened my laptop. I made lists. Debts. Opportunities. Names. And something else too. Patterns. Because Grandpa had done more than leave me money. He'd confirmed what I'd felt my whole life. That being underestimated wasn't a flaw. It was an advantage. The next morning, the calls started. Denise left a voicemail. Cheerful. Casual. Just checking in. Carla texted twice. Then 3 times. Then added a smiley face like punctuation might soften intent. Mark sent an email. Subject line. Important. I didn't respond. Instead, I went to work. Ate lunch at my desk. Came home and cooked a simple meal. I lived exactly the same. Because impatience makes noise. And I had learned from the best that the quietest person in the room is often the one holding all the leverage. They thought I was overwhelmed. They thought I was scared. They thought I was in over my head. What they didn't know, what they couldn't imagine, was that I wasn't planning how to spend the money. I was planning how to use it. And the moment they stopped pretending to be kind was coming faster than they realized. 3 months passed. Long enough for their patience to rot. Denise stopped pretending her calls were casual. Carla's texts lost their emojis. Mark's emails grew sharper, shorter, less concerned, more directive. Still, I said nothing. Silence makes people nervous. Especially people who are used to control. The invitation came on a Friday afternoon. Family barbecue, Denise's place, 4 p.m. No question mark. No hope you can make it. Just expectation. I almost deleted it. Almost. But something in Grandpa's letter nudged me forward. Use this when you're ready. So I went. Denise's house looked different than the last time I'd seen it. New patio furniture. Fresh landscaping. A banner strung across the fence that said Family First in cheerful block letters. Performative. Very Denise. Cars lined the street. Nice ones. Loud ones. Proof of arrival. I parked down the block. When I walked in, conversations paused. Not fully. Just enough. Carla greeted me with a tight hug. Wow. You look comfortable. I smiled. I am. That unsettled her. Mark stood by the grill, already holding court. He barely nodded at me. Denise, holding a drink she hadn't touched, raised her voice. There she is. Heads turned. She crossed the lawn and kissed my cheek like we were close. We were just talking about you. I believed her. Come sit, she said, steering me toward the center table. Not beside her. Across. Where everyone could see. Plates clinked. Drinks poured. Denise launched into a story about her renovation delays. Carla complained about the market. Mark joked about how hard it was to keep employees loyal these days. I listened. That was still my role. Then Denise laughed and said it, loud enough for everyone. Some people just don't change, no matter how much money they get. A few chuckles. My brother shifted uncomfortably. Carla smiled into her glass. I met Denise's eyes. She expected embarrassment. She got calm. I agree, I said. Change is overrated. That wasn't the answer she wanted. Mark jumped in. You know, money like that can disappear fast if you're not careful. I'm being careful, I replied. Carla tilted her head. Careful how? I took a sip of water. I don't talk about plans before they're finished. The table went quiet. Denise recovered first. Well, she said brightly, raising her glass again. Here's to trusting family. They all drank. I didn't. Because earlier that morning, before I'd chosen my shoes, before I decided to come, I'd signed something. Not impulsively. Not emotionally. Strategically. Denise's renovations weren't fully paid for. Mark's business expansion? Over-leveraged. Carla's investment opportunity? Built on assumptions, not guarantees. They'd borrowed confidently. Because confident people assume tomorrow will look like today. I excused myself early. Denise followed me to the driveway. You okay? You've been so distant. I've been busy, I said honestly. With what? She pressed. I paused. Just long enough. Listening. Her smile faltered. That night, fireworks went off from her backyard. Laughter. Music. Celebration. I drove home in silence. Because the paperwork I'd finalized meant that some of the things they were standing on, financially speaking, no longer belonged to them the way they thought they did. They thought I was still behind. Still quiet. Still simple. They thought that barbecue was proof that nothing had really changed. What they didn't know was that it was the last time they'd ever feel that comfortable laughing in my presence. The shift didn't happen all at once. That's the thing about real consequences. They don't announce themselves. They arrive quietly. Like a draft in a room you thought was sealed. The first call came from Carla. She didn't say hello. Have you heard anything about market freezes? She asked, breathless. I leaned against my kitchen counter, phone tucked between my shoulder and ear. I don't follow the market closely. A lie. A small one. Well, something's wrong, she said. My advisor isn't returning calls. I pictured her pacing, tapping her nails, refreshing her inbox. For years, Carla had believed confidence was the same thing as knowledge. I'm sure it'll resolve, I said gently. She didn't like that answer. 2 days later, Mark called. This time, his voice wasn't sharp. It was measured. Careful. Like he was negotiating without knowing the price yet. Just wanted to check in, he said. See how you're doing. I'm fine, I replied. A pause. Then, listen, business has been unpredictable lately. I waited. We might need to restructure, he continued. Short-term stuff. That sounds stressful, I said. Another pause. Longer. Denise mentioned you'd been resourceful lately. There it was. The assumption that money automatically equals obligation. I've been organized, I corrected. Mark exhaled. Right. Well, family helps family. I pictured Grandpa shaking his head at that line. I'd heard it my whole life, usually right before someone asked for something they didn't deserve. I believe in accountability, I said. The line went quiet. By the end of the week, Denise called. Crying. Real crying this time. Not the performative kind she used at funerals and holidays. The bank is asking questions, she said. I don't understand how this happened. I sat at my table, looking at the folder I'd neatly labeled weeks ago. Documents. Numbers. Timelines. I'm sorry, I said. And I was, just not for the reason she thought. They're talking about liens, she whispered. About restructuring loans. I closed my eyes. Because the thing Denise didn't realize yet was that she was finally feeling what it's like when the ground shifts without warning. I don't know what to do, she said. That was new. Denise always knew what to do. Or at least, she always pretended to. I let the silence stretch. Then I said, we can talk. Hope rushed into her voice. Really? Yes, I said. But not over the phone. We set a date. Same restaurant. Same table. When I arrived, Denise was already there, hands clasped tightly in front of her. Mark showed up next, jaw tense. Carla followed, sunglasses on indoors like she was hiding from something. No one laughed this time. No one commented on my clothes. I ordered soup again. Denise noticed. Her lips parted, then closed. Mark cleared his throat. So, you said you might have ideas. I nodded and slid a folder across the table. Not aggressively. Not dramatically. Just enough. Inside were options. Terms. Boundaries. Carla flipped through the pages, her face draining of color. You did this? She asked. I prepared, I replied. Denise's voice shook. Why didn't you tell us you were doing all this? I met her eyes. Because you never asked what I was capable of, I said calmly. You only asked what I needed. That landed. Hard. Mark leaned back, rubbing his face. So what now? I folded my hands. Now, I said, you decide how much your pride is worth. They looked at one another. At the papers. At me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the afterthought at the table. I was the only one who knew how this ended. And as they sat there, realizing the balance had shifted, I felt something unfamiliar but solid settle into my chest. Not revenge. Control. No one spoke for a long time. The server came by, sensed the tension, and quietly refilled water glasses like she didn't want to interrupt something important. She was right. Denise stared at the papers like they might rearrange themselves if she waited long enough. Mark reread the same paragraph twice, his finger tracing the lines as if touch might change the meaning. Carla didn't sit down at all. She hovered, pacing in a tight line beside the table. This isn't fair, Denise finally said. Her voice wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It was confused. I'd heard that tone before, when things stopped responding to her the way they always had. I never said it was, I replied. Mark looked up sharply. You're enjoying this? I shook my head. No. I'm finishing it. That distinction mattered. Carla stopped pacing. So that's it. You just swoop in and decide everything. I met her eyes. No. I waited. You decided everything long before I ever acted. Silence again. The truth has weight. It presses down on rooms. Denise swallowed. You could have warned us. I thought of every dinner where my words were cut off. Every holiday where I was spoken around. Every moment they assumed I didn't understand because I didn't interrupt. You mistook quiet for incapable, I said evenly. That was the warning. Mark leaned back, jaw tight. You're asking us to trust you. I almost laughed. Instead, I said, I'm asking you to read. He did. Again. Carla sank into her chair slowly, like her body had finally accepted what her pride hadn't. If we don't sign? I didn't rush to answer. Because urgency had always been their weapon, not mine. Then the process continues without my involvement, I said. And you deal with institutions that don't care about your last name. Denise closed her eyes. When she opened them, something was gone. Not hope. Entitlement. I didn't think you were like this, she whispered. I considered that. I am exactly like this, I said. You just never bothered to look. Mark exhaled sharply through his nose. Dad knew. It wasn't a question. Yes, I said. He did. That landed harder than anything else. Denise reached for the pen. Her hand shook. Signing took less than a minute. Years of dismissal undone by ink. Carla signed next, avoiding my eyes. Mark was last. He hesitated, just a second longer than the others, then added his name. When it was done, no one spoke. I gathered the papers calmly, sliding them back into the folder. Denise looked up at me, voice small. So what happens now? I stood, slipped my coat on, and met her gaze. Now, I said, we redefine our relationship. She nodded slowly. I left first. Outside, the air felt lighter, sharper, honest. I didn't feel victorious. I felt finished. Because the thing they finally understood, too late to change, but just in time to matter, was this. I had never been behind them. I had simply been walking a different direction. Life didn't transform overnight. That's what movies get wrong. There was no montage. No sudden glow-up. No dramatic exit where everyone clapped or apologized. What changed was quieter than that. Denise stopped hosting loud gatherings. When she invited me places now, her messages were careful, measured. She asked instead of assumed. Carla sent polite updates. Articles about markets. Comments about learning the hard way. We were cordial. Nothing more. Mark avoided me entirely. And that was fine. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't managing their comfort. I paid off my house in full. The relief of it didn't feel exciting. It felt stable. Like breathing without checking the clock. I finished my education without rushing. Took classes because I wanted the knowledge, not the credential. Grandpa would have liked that. I started something small. Nothing flashy. Something built on margins and patience. On listening more than talking. It grew. Slowly. Reliably. No one in the family asked how. They were afraid of the answer. Sometimes, late at night, I reread Grandpa's letter. The paper had softened at the folds. The ink hadn't faded. Use this when you're ready, not when they expect you to. I understood that line differently now. Readiness wasn't about money. It was about knowing who you are when no one is clapping. At the next family funeral, years later, I stood near the back again. Not because I was invisible, but because I chose the vantage point. Denise caught my eye and nodded. Respectful. Careful. That was enough. I still wear Grandpa's watch. It ticks steadily against my wrist, marking time the way he always did, without rushing, without noise. Every so often, someone new meets me and underestimates me. They see simplicity. They assume limits. I let them. Because I've learned something the hard way and the right way at the same time. Silence isn't emptiness. It's space. And in that space, I built a life no one thought to question. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.